listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the Victorian government has announced it's investigating concerns over mothers' groups and homeschooling run by a neo-Nazi network. We unpack why the experts are concerned over this latest escalation and what's really behind the rise in far-right extremism. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 3rd of December. Bruce Lehrmann has lost his latest defamation appeal. The federal court rejecting his bid to overturn Justice Michael Lee's ruling last year that on the balance of probabilities, he likely raped Brittany Higgins. Justice Michael Wigley today dismissing Lehrmann's appeal with costs. The former Liberal staffer's lawyer, Zali Burrows, says Bruce is devastated and still denies the allegation, adding he is now weighing up a run at the High Court.
He will be seeking advice for special leave, and it's not the end of it in respect of his pursuit for justice.
A chilling warning from Russia, with President Vladimir Putin warning he does not intend to fight Europe, but, quote, if Europe starts, we are ready right now. It comes after 5 hours of talks in Moscow that failed to produce a breakthrough on a US-backed Ukraine peace deal. Russia says discussions between Vladimir Putin and President Trump's top negotiators were constructive, but key parts of the proposal remain unacceptable, including demands for Ukraine to surrender territory and Europe's security guarantees. And Federal Communications Minister Annika Wells is under fire after Revelations taxpayers footed a massive bill for a New York event promoting Australia's teen social media ban. It's estimated the event alone cost $70,000, with almost another $100,000 spent on flights for the minister and her staff to attend the UN General Assembly. Wells delayed her trip after the deadly Optus 000 outage in September, but still flew to New York hosting an event with several world leaders. The government has defended the visit, saying it was vital for engaging with global leaders on online safety. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with far-right researcher Dr Kaz Ross on secretive neo-Nazi homeschooling networks operating across the country. Kaz warns these extremist groups can often operate as patriarchal cults with coercive control. We unpack what's fueling this far-right extremism and why governments need to listen. Kaz, thanks so much for joining us. We know there has been this concerning increase in neo-Nazi activity in our community. Now the government has announced it's going to investigate this homeschooling network. Can you explain what this network is?
At the moment, I think the network is mostly women with very small children, toddlers and babies, supporting each other, meeting together, doing craft together, cooking together and sharing childcare. So I think the homeschool idea is probably not in its full form at this stage, but it's something that the neo-Nazis are intending to implement sometime in the future when the children are old enough. They don't want the children to go to school.
We saw an increasing in homeschooling overall during COVID and post-COVID. Why is this homeschooling network of such great concern?
The neo-Nazis in Australia want to create a parallel society, a whites-only parallel society. So they want to be immune for any threats of losing their jobs for having odious views and being a Nazi. They want to have their own businesses. They want to employ each other. They want to be standing outside of mainstream society. And they're very, very concerned about the kind of education that they think their children are going to get. One of the most motivating factors for neo-Nazis is a slogan that comes from the American Nazis, which is about preserving the future for white children. And so this is something that they often evoke, and they say, we're doing this for the children, we're doing this for the future of the white race, and we're doing it for our children in particular. So for them, the idea of creating a whites-only world for their white children is extremely important and a very motivating idea. So for them, they want their children to grow up within a belief system. That belief system is the idea of a natural order, that there is a hierarchy of gender and a hierarchy of race. And at the top of the natural order are white men, underneath that is white women, and then the other so-called races follow from that. If they were running Australia, they would boot out of Australia every single person who's not 100% white. That would be their goal. Clearly, they're never going to achieve that. So instead, they're working on building up a whites-only community. And that also includes making sure that the children are brought up within this community.
There's also, has been some pretty chilling threats from this group regarding any investigations or any implications for trying to break up this homeschooling network. Can you detail those?
Yes, the leader, Thomas Sowell, has said that he is prepared to commit terrorist acts if the police come for his children. So this is one of the psychology issues that these neo-Nazis have. They feel that they are targeted by society. They feel that they're treated extremely unfairly, that overall white people are treated very unfairly in Australia, but them in particular because they're standing up for white people. And because the whole future for white children is so central to their ideology, they have said, and Saul himself has said explicitly, that he's prepared to undertake terrorist acts if anybody comes for his children. So I think that investigating these kinds of networks is really tricky because they can feel targeted. As you've mentioned, homeschooling has really increased during the COVID years and post-COVID. So for neo-Nazis, they say, well, why are we the ones being investigated? We're the ones who most care for our children. We're building up a white community for our children. Why are we being picked on again? So this notion that they are the victims and that society and the police are unfairly targeting them leads to a dangerous mindset, an us and them kind of mindset. And in their mind, if they're under attack in any form, they believe they're justified to do self-defence. And we've seen the kind of self-defence actions that they take. There was assaults on hikers in the Cathedral Ranges in Victoria, assault on a security guard at Channel 9 in Melbourne, and so on and so forth. So the group themselves say we're not a violent group. However, they are prepared to use violence for self-defence, and anybody coming after their children will need to take that into account.
Kaz, the Australian Federal Police would not comment on its investigations into this group. A government spokesperson has said, quote, parents who choose to homeschool their children have a responsibility to do the right thing to provide a safe and quality education. Legally, where does the government stand with its ongoing investigation, whether this group is doing anything illegal?
From what I've seen, they are parents that look after their children. Their children appear to be fed. They are clothed well. They do lots of activities, craft activities and play activities and cooking. So I've not seen anything. From what I've seen, I've not seen anything that would indicate there's any neglect or any abuse. I guess the issue really is that if you bring children up in a closed community with a certain belief set, you're basically saying, bring your children up in a cult. And we know from other research onto cults, this is not the greatest thing for children, to be cut off away from society within an extreme group who believe some very extreme and odious views. So I think the difficulty of legally looking at what they're doing is, perhaps there are other people who are homeschooling who are neglecting and abusing their children. I can't say for sure that no Nazis are abusing or neglecting their children, but from what I see, that is not evident at all.
Kaz, in regards to how concerned authorities should be about this situation, you're saying from a bigger point of view, this is about a long-term plan with this very concerning natural order. What would you like to see the government do or the federal police?
This is a very big question. The responses that we've seen have been increasing in laws and increasing in prohibitions. And some of those prohibitions have worked. We would have seen 60 men doing Hitler salutes in front of the New South Wales Parliament instead of just standing in front of the New South Wales Parliament. So we can say that the ban on the Hitler salute and the ban of the swastika have worked, although the group has plans to legally challenge both those bans. So the activities of the group have not at all been slowed down by these bans. They've continued to get around the bans, they've continued to meet, and their members have really grown. Because of the big debate that we're having in this country around immigration, they've been able to attract a lot of people to their movement. And we see that in politics generally, that there's a big shift to the right on immigration. And of course, One Nation is benefiting from that. So when we look at the rules and the prohibitions, the group still functions and is still growing. It's probably doubled in size this year, I would say, across the whole of Australia. So more laws, I think, probably don't do it. In terms of policing something like homeschooling, I'm not really sure how we do that right now. I mean, there are groups who homeschool, religious cults, I'm thinking, in particular, and I'm not sure what kind of welfare checks those groups have. I think the most important thing we can do is to realise that the best way to deal with this kind of extremism is to have open and honest debates about things like migration, and for the government to be transparent and to listen to what people are saying instead of dismissing them as just a bunch of racists, because there are a whole bunch of people that are being drawn to this group because they're the only ones really calling out migration and what's happening with the economy. And, they've linked it to housing and stuff like that. So the government needs to be transparent and have the difficult discussions for a start. And we need to do things like provide support for families. At the moment, if your son, brother, father, uncle, boyfriend joins the Nazis, there's nothing. There's nothing for you. You're not going to ring up the National Security Hotline and say, hey, my brother's gone really racist and I think he's joining the Nazis. It's pointless. So where's the support for families to say to them, you've got to think about this like joining a cult. And how do you get someone out of a cult? What are the strategies for getting someone out of a cult? It's absolutely true, although it pains me to say it, that the neo-Nazi movement can offer a sense of purpose, a sense of brotherhood, and even employment. And these are things that for many young people, they feel despairing about the future, and suddenly they've got this glorious vision of the future. Instead of them being losers who can never own a house, they've got a vision and a role and something to work towards. So I think we as a society are really failing these young people if they feel so grim about their future that they want to throw their lot in with a bunch of extremists.
Kaz, I'm so glad you've just made those comments, because do you feel like as a society, but also governments, both sides of government, have neglected a whole generation of Australians who aren't listening, who aren't making instrumental long-term change for these really big issues? They feel disillusioned and they think that these groups are going to provide some sense of belonging.
Yeah, absolutely. And the core issue there is housing. There's such a huge generational divide around home ownership and housing, and the sense that for young people, there's no point. They're concerned about the future, the impact of AI on employment. It's a really tough time to be a young person. It's a really tough time. We also need to think of the neo-Nazi movement not just as a political movement, but actually as a cult where people do have that emotional connection and they're getting their emotional needs met. So anything that we can do to build up that sense of belonging is important. Unfortunately, the neo-Nazis are extremely good at rolling with whatever issue is coming up on the day. They've really perfected how to wedge issues, how to wedge the generational divide, how to get people to ignore mainstream politics or mainstream media. So it's hard to reach them that way. But we know from the research on cults, the way you get people out of cults is the people that love them, that they love, maintain contact and connection with them and gradually work to bring them out. And we need to have an awareness of that. For the women, we need to be aware that there's a large degree of coercive control going on in these groups, where the men, because it's the so-called natural order, will determine that women cannot wear trousers or women cannot wear makeup or women should not be involved in politics in any way or women should not have jobs. So if we think about it as a cult with coercive control, then we're in a whole different framework from just thinking about, oh, these are Nazis and it's racist and they're anti-Semitic and so on and so forth.
Kaz, to what degree do you think, especially with the younger generation, social media and algorithms are playing into radicalising young people?
Oh, absolutely huge. There is zero doubt about that. That some of the worst algorithms you'll see on YouTube and TikTok, it's very, very hard to look at those platforms and not be exposed to extremist content extremely quickly. Because we have to remember that social media companies are based on engagement. And this kind of content gets a lot of engagement. This is one issue that we see with the neo-Nazis. Their aim is to attract a lot of attention in the media. So they do these stunts. And the idea of the stunt, it's not the 10 minutes in front of the parliament. That's not the action. The action is what happens after that. So for them, they want media attention. They like it when, the premier's talking about them. They like being on the front page of the paper day after day after day. They feel that it's building their brand recognition. And they say, well, we were just standing there. We didn't do anything wrong. Why can't a white man just stand in front of his parliament? So for them, they manipulate that media attention, but they basically don't want people knowing their kind of dirty secrets around coercive control, around some of the charges of violence that some of them are facing. Recently in New South Wales, one of the members was arrested with child sexual abuse material and so on and so forth. That's that story they don't want told.
It's such an important conversation, and thanks so much for joining us, Kaz.
You're very welcome.
That was far-right researcher Dr Kaz Ross. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.